Have you ever heard of a crime being committed with just a single thought? Well, today we're cracking open an ancient case file, a legal puzzle from the Talmud that starts with one mysterious verse. And believe me, it unfolds into a brilliant detective story. Okay, let's get into it.
So our main subject is a concept called Piggul. And to put it simply, it's a sacred offering that gets totally invalidated, not because of a physical flaw, but because the priest had the wrong thought at the exact wrong moment. Specifically, he was thinking about eating it or burning it after its proper time was up. It's literally a sacrifice spoiled by a thought.
All right, here it is. This is our primary piece of evidence, kind of like the scene of the crime, straight from the book of Leviticus. The Law of Piggul is mentioned right here, but notice something really important. It's specifically talking about just one type of offering, the peace offering.
And that, right there, leads us to the central question of this whole investigation. Is this law just a one-off, a specific rule for a specific situation? Or is this verse a clue, the first thread that could unravel a much bigger legal tapestry? Well, the ancient sages put on their detective hats to find out. So here's our game plan. We'll start with the puzzle of that single verse, then we'll see how the sages expanded the law. After that, we'll uncover the amazing principle behind it all, test that principle with some exceptions, and then wrap up with a really fascinating complex case study.
Okay, so the investigation kicks off, and at first glance, the law seems pretty simple, pretty narrow. Piggul applies to peace offerings. Case closed, right? Heh, not for the Talmudic sages. For them, this was just the very beginning. Now the real detective work starts. The sages scanned that original verse like it was a crime scene, looking for any textual clue, any little word that might hint that this law has a much wider reach than it seems.
And they find one. Clue number 1. The verse doesn't just say peace offering, it specifies flesh of the sacrifice. The sages thought, that phrase has to be there for a reason. Their conclusion? It's there to include other offerings where meat is eaten, like sin offerings. And just like that, boom, the circle of the law just got bigger.
Then they find a second clue. The verse uses the very general word sacrifice. So they asked, why be so general? And they figured it must be to include offerings that don't have any meat eaten by people, the ones that are entirely burned on the altar, like a classic burnt offering. And there you go, the law expands again.
But then, they made their biggest leap yet, using this really sophisticated technique. It's called a verbal analogy. They linked a word associated with Piggul to the same word in a completely different law. This incredible chain of logic let them pull in a whole new category of things, non-animal offerings. We're talking birds, meal offerings, even a special log of oil. Suddenly, the law seems to cover almost everything.
But wait a minute. If the law applies to pretty much all offerings, why did the Torah even bother mentioning peace offerings in the first place? That question pushed the sages to their big aha moment, the discovery of this brilliant, unifying principle that explains everything.
And this is it, the core idea, the permitting factor, or matir in Hebrew. Just think of it like a key. One specific action in the ritual, like sprinkling the blood, acts as a key that unlocks the rest of the offering, making it permissible to either be eaten or burned on the altar.
Let's take that burnt offering, for example. Sprinkling the blood is the key. That's the matir. As soon as that blood hits the altar, it unlocks the next steps. Now the flesh can be burned, and now the hide can be given to the priests. You see how that one action permits the others?
Okay, so here's the theory. Piggul only applies to offerings that have a permitting factor. Now, any good theory doesn't just explain what's included, it has to explain what's left out. It needs to draw a really clear line. So what gets excluded?
And this just illustrates the principle so beautifully. Things like the handful of flour from a meal offering, or frankincense, incense, even the blood itself. None of these are subject to Piggul. And why not? Because they don't have a permitting factor. In most cases, they are the permitting factor. They're the key, not the door being unlocked. The theory holds up perfectly.
But of course, no good Talmudic discussion is ever complete without a debate. Rabbi Shimon came along with a slightly different take. He agreed about the whole permitting factor idea, but he argued it only counted if that key action, like sprinkling the blood, happened on the main external altar. It's a subtle difference, but it just shows you how every single detail was analyzed.
All right, time for our final act. This is where the system gets put to the ultimate test with a really specific and kind of tricky case, the log of oil that was part of a leper's purification offering.
Now, to get the oil, we first need to understand a related argument. Rabbi Meir argued that an animal's blood permits the wine that comes with it. But the other rabbis came back with this killer argument. They said, hold on, that can't be true. A person can bring the animal offering today and the wine 10 days from now. They can't be locked together like that.
So the debate is at a standstill. And this is where another scholar, Rav Yosef, steps in. He basically settles the whole thing by bringing in the opinion of an even greater authority, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who was so revered he was often just called Rabbi.
And here is the absolutely elegant solution. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says the animal's blood doesn't permit the libations. So what about the leper's oil? He says the oil permits itself. The special ritual actions done with the oil, the sprinklings, those are what unlock the rest of the oil to be eaten. It has its own internal permitting factor. It's a beautiful solution that keeps the whole principle intact.
So after all that, what did this detective story really show us? Well, it shows that Talmudic law isn't just a random list of rules, it's a system, built piece by painstaking piece, right from the scripture. Every single word is treated as a potential clue. And the goal isn't just to know the rules, but to find the deep, unifying principles underneath it all. It's a system that values debate and is precise enough to solve even the most complicated legal puzzles.
Which really leaves us with one last thing to think about. This whole process, it wasn't just one person thinking in a room. It was a conversation happening between generations, all focused on a single, ancient text. And it makes you wonder, in a legal system that's basically a living, breathing conversation that spans centuries, can any case ever really be considered closed?